Welcome to Unspoken History. My name is Keisha Alexander. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to talk about the black plantation owners or the black slave owning families in the United States. Um, Slave owning families started with colonization because black and white people came to America for colonization. So by the year 1830, there was more than 3,775 black slaveholders in the South. Okay, but before 1830, they were all over. Wherever there was slavery, there were black slave owners. Okay. By 1830, there were 3,775 black, including mixed race, of which, when you read, because we have to somehow continue to put the old narrative in there, all of the black slave owning families were mixed race. When you read, even historians, when they write, they tell a little bit of the truth, but then they always add in there, oh, well, these were the Creoles and the mixed Spanish and the mixed this, and they weren't just regular black people, but they were regular black people. They weren't all mixed. The ones in Louisiana probably most likely were, but not all of them either. My grandmother looked mixed, but she wasn't. Okay, it says slaveholders in America who owned a total of 12,760 slaves. I'm sure that number's not right either, which was a small percentage of the total of a total of over 2 million slaves then held in the South. 80% of the black slaveholders were located in Louisiana, South Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. There were economic and ethnic differences between free blacks in the Upper South and the Deeper South, with the latter fewer in number, but wealthier and typically of mixed race. Half the black slave half of the black slaveholders lived in cities rather than the countryside. Okay, we're not going to go into that. Because then they want to say also, well, they just they bought their family members and friends, and those were their slaves. No. In 1985, a statewide study of black slaveholders in South Carolina, Larry Koger challenged this benevolent view, saying that they were just doing it, they were trying to help their friends and family. He found that the majority of the mixed race or black slaveholders appeared to hold at least some of their slaves for commercial reasons. For instance, he noted that in 1850, more than 80% of black slaveholders were of mixed race, but nearly 90% of their slaves were classified as black. Whatever. Koger also noted that many South Carolina free blacks operated small businesses as skilled artisans, and many owned slaves working in those businesses. Cougar emphasizes that it was all too common for freed slaves to become slaveholders themselves. Now, when it comes to black people, we call them freed slaves. When it's white people, they're indentured servants. Black people and white people were both indentured servants. Okay, so the one guy, let's see. There was another article that I wanted to, is it this one? Let's see. It says, this article is called The Root. One of the most vexing questions in African American history is whether free African Americans themselves owned slaves. The short answer to this question, you might suspect, is yes. Of course, some free black people in the country bought and sold other black people, and did so at least since 1654. I'm going to say 1654. That was when it was starting to be recorded. But before the 1600s, they don't tell us what happened from 1492 to 1600. That's over 100 years. So for the first 100 years, what was going on in America? That's what we're not told. We are brought up to 1619 when the first 20 odd Negroes arrived in Virginia, And the Smithsonian wrote articles that saying that that wasn't when the first Africans arrived in America. It wasn't 1619 because there were already Africans in America. If you want to say that all black people came from Africa, then America was full of Africans. The answer to these questions are complex, and historians have been arguing for some time over whether free blacks purchased family as slaves in order to protect them, motivated on the other hand by benevolence and philanthropy, as historian Carter G. Woodson would put it. So Carter G. Woodson, this black historian, was going to, is trying to make it look benevolent. Yes, black people owned slaves, but those were their relatives. Or what? So that's the way Carter G. Woodson put it. Or whether, on the other hand, they purchased other black people as an act of exploitation, primarily to exploit their free labor for profit, just like white slave owners did, of course. Yeah, this is not. You can't class all black people into the same category. Well, the blacks are this and the blacks are that. There are billions of people on the planet with all different colored shades of skin. We're not all the same people. We're all from the same race. We're all the human race. Now, if you want to classify yourself as something other than men and women created by God, okay. But there are not different species of men. There's only one kind or race of men. The other things are races of animals, bugs, whatever, water creatures. But there's only one race of men. And we all fit in there, women and men. So this is another example to me of a person that looks like me, a black person, whether they were mulatto or not. It don't matter. One of their parents was black or brown. Being used or even participating freely. Because like I said, black people and white people have been working together for centuries. This is not about your skin color. They were working together in Europe. How do you think we got to be mulatto? If the black royals and the white royals were not intermarrying together, you wouldn't have had them, but that's what you had. So he was trying to make it seem nice, seem like, black people were not doing the same thing white people were doing by saying they just, these were their family members. Okay, the evidence shows that unfortunately, both things are true. The great African American historian John Hope Franklin states this clearly. The majority of Negro owners of slaves had some personal interest in their property. But he admits that there were instances, however, in which free Negroes had a real economic interest in the institution of slavery and held slaves in order to improve their economic status. Those people want you to believe that the Confederates were white. There were so many black slave owners in North and South Carolina. Yeah, they wanted to keep their business. Mm-hmm. But at some point they had to change the narrative, right? They couldn't let us know that during slavery, black and white people were enslaving the Negroes. Because then they couldn't use the story. And I'm not saying that, listen, people die. It is not the same people. These people have not been living for 500 years and carrying on this same perpetual situation. No, there is a being higher than people that is continuing this atrocity year after year, right? These are family lines. Family lines. When they left Europe, they sent their monarchs. They sent the people, the warring factions kicked people out. Those people came over here. You get New York. You get California. You get. So we think that we're over here in this free country that we fought for on the 4th of July of 1776 when we got our independence from. what you did was you kicked Britain out because Britain wanted to stop the slavery of the indigenous people. So when you got victory from Europe, it was so that you can have victory over the indigenous people. So that's what happened. Okay. And it wasn't because God don't like the Negroes. I know that's what some people think. And I have been told that myself as a youngster, that you're supposed to be treated like this. And it's in the Bible. Well, tell me what else is in that Bible. Because there's a lot of stories in there. And there is a time when that you're supposed to be in this situation is supposed to end. It comes to an end. Okay. So what I'm saying is this is a different war. This is a spiritual war. This is a war between good and evil. And it always has been for the souls of humanity. Either you're going to be uh, returned to the Most High, which was what what the purpose for Jesus coming is, so that you can be reconciled back to the God that created you, or you're going to follow the people of a thousand gods, and everything's a God. The sun's a God, the moon's a God, the trees are God, ocean is a God, stuff in the oceans are gods, stuff in the sky is God, the birds are God. All of that has God status in some culture. So, do you think that those other gods are looking and saying, "Oh, you can't serve me because you're white"? Or you can't serve me because you're black? Absolutely not. Anything calling itself God, including the Most High, they don't care what you look like as long as you do what they say. So this whole idea that blacks did not suppress other blacks, in what world? The world did not just begin in 1492 with white people telling the story. And they weren't, that's the part that's confusing the most, is that these scholarly people, some of these people over in Europe, these prominent people, writers and uh, literary prominent people, sorry, saying that wrong, but people that write the literature that we read, these were not, we've been duped. I'm just saying. It says, in a fascinating essay reviewing this controversy, R. Halliburton shows that free black people have owned slaves in each of the 13 states in the whole 13 colonies, and later in every state that countenanced slave that allowed slavery, at least since Anthony Johnson and his wife Mary went to court in Virginia in 1654. Now, this is just because it's something noted in court. This black man going to court to uh, declare his black slave his eternal slave, his slave for life. He went to court because this was after the slave law was written in Virginia. The slave law was written in Virginia. Oh, wait, maybe it was before. I'm not sure. Okay, so but John Anthony Johnson went to court to have this black man, John Castor, to be his slave for life. And for a time, free black people could even own the service of white indentured servants in Virginia as well. Free blacks owned slaves in Boston by 1724 and in Connecticut by 1783. By 1790, 48 black people in Maryland owned 143 slaves. One particularly notorious black Maryland farmer named Nate Butler regularly purchased and sold Negroes for the Southern trade. It was a lucrative business, and everybody took advantage of it. Blacks and whites, and everything in between. Okay, let me see if I got another one. Um, let's see. This William Ellison. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. So I had read somewhere on the Library of Congress's website about Confederate soldiers, black ones, that left diaries. You hear over and over again, blacks didn't serve in the Confederate. The Confederates were black. That's why a few years back, like a lot of the videos that I seen on YouTube, you don't see no more. Some years ago, there was a black man, an older man down in the South, who was carrying a Confederate flag, and people were stopping him, asking him, "What is wrong with you? How could you be young people, 18, 19 years old, have no idea what they're talking about?" But they had the nerve to come at this older black man who was probably 70 or 80 years old, who knew what he was talking about, and said, "You don't understand what a Confederate is." And we don't. Not if we believe what we're taught in school. Confederates were black and white. And what happened when it got close to 1865 in the Civil War, majority of those prominent blacks that were in the South with all that money moved to the North, right? So they can continue this farce that, there's black against white, because those poor white people down there didn't understand what was going on. But the rich whites and rich blacks do. So instead of staying down there having to deal with these middle class and poor whites that don't understand the game, they moved to the North. Right, so then most of the prominent blacks you thought was always in the North. No, they came from the South. Except for the ones in Louisiana. They love their Louisiana. They probably stayed there for quite some time. But majority of the other ones, if they could not maintain their status where they were, they moved to the North. To the North, friends, to the North. So then when the poor blacks started coming up to the North, these other blacks look at them like dumb Negro. I mean, I heard some black people say some horrible things about Southern Negroes, about Negroes that were coming up, migrating up from the South. And we still have it. We still have this division between colors, skin colors. If you're light, then everybody like you. If you're dark, then you're the worst. Why? What does what does dark skin have to do with morality? What does white skin have to do? White don't mean moral. Do you know people will give their kids to rich people just because they got money? Money does not make you a moral person. Stop giving your kids to these people, or do what thou wilt, if that's who you serve. Okay? Just saying. Because you know what Lester Crowley said, do whatever you want. You ain't got to answer to nobody. Well, he thought he was going to live forever. He thought his God was going to let him live forever. He ain't here. Lester Crowley ain't here. Madame Blavatsky ain't here. None of those occultists are here. They're dead and gone and in the grave like everybody else. Let no man deceive you. Or, like I always say, you can do whatever you want. Follow whoever you want. Believe whatever you want. But you're going to pay for whatever it is that you do. We all are. I'm going to get my reward, but I want my reward to be a just reward for my just actions. For my heart being turned to the Lord, because that's where I want it. I know everybody's tricked. Why would I dislike somebody? We all tricked. We all been duped. So William Ellison was one of them prominent black slave owners. He was born April Ellison. So he was born in April, so they named him April. And because the way the story is going is that he was born to a black, I think they said Igbo woman. Yeah, Igbo woman, and apparently a white Englishman. And so his English father raised him up in his house and taught him a trade and helped him save money so that he can then, when he got old enough, could buy his freedom, and have money to start his life. Now, do you think this mulatto man married a white woman? No, because they knew he was part black and it wasn't legal. Okay, let's see. It said at age 21, April, the man, took Matilda, a 16-year-old slave woman, as his consort. Slaves did not have legally recognized marriages. They had a daughter, Eliza and Eliza. All right, together, born 1811. Eliza Ann later married James Johnson. Okay, so of course this William Ellison married a slave girl, and they had children. And those children were they probably didn't look mixed, because if he was mixed and she was not, but it didn't really say if she was a mixed person too. But he became a very, very prominent slave owner, cotton gin. Let me see. It says something about the cotton gin. He was educated on the cotton gin. He also learned blacksmithing. Um, at age 26, April was freed by his master, William Ellison. It was his dad. It was his father. Likely his father, as April took his name as a free man. April appeared to have purchased his freedom by money saved from portions of his earnings. According to the 1800 law, five freemen had to appear with his master in court to attest to April's ability to support himself in freedom. In freedom. So basically, what they're saying is his dad and other people had to come and say, yeah, he's a good skillsman. He can take care of himself. He should be allowed to be a free man. It took years for Ellison to buy his wife and children out of slavery. He had to earn the money and also work within state laws that restricted such manumissions. His priority was to free his wife so that their future children were born free. After gaining his freedom, he moved to Sumter County, South Carolina, in the high hills of the Santee, where he established himself as a cotton gin maker. So, there you have it. Of course, he got to be rich off of that cotton gin. Old black men in America that was supposed to be slaves, right? Yeah, to think that there were indentured servants that were black that could then be free and then get a plantation on black. None of that. That would have been interesting. Okay, the truth would have been interesting as a child, but no, we wouldn't have the situation that we have today if we had all known the truth. But anyway, the Bible did say that they would think to change times and laws, and that a certain group of people would know their language, their people, or their nation. I wonder who that's talking about. We still arguing about who the Negro is. He's from Africa. He's American Indian. No, he's not. He's a beast that came off the boat with Noah. Oh yeah, those are real stories. Real stories that the United States circulated for years. He was a beast that came off the boat, not the three sons of Noah, one of the animals. All just so you won't have to tell who these people really are. But anyway, so yes, black folks owned slaves in America from the time slavery began until the time slavery ended. And that's just the way it is. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a good day.